like courteous anymore.
Okay.
Good morning, everybody. First, I would like to start off just by having everyone close their eyes and imagining this while I set up my PowerPoint. I just imagine waking up 4 hours after waking up with only 4 hours of sleep after staying up all night trying to prepare, I don't know, like a speech, because the speech was really killer. And you have class in an hour. So, what are you gonna do? What is the one thing that will keep you awake during that class in the hour? What is it? Just shout it out.
Food.
Coffee.
Coffee, exactly, coffee. And since we're all from California, or you can open your eyes now. Since we're all from California, I mean, I know we all love coffee, right? Or else there wouldn't be as many Starbucks as there is. So, but I mean, you all know coffee, right? But what you may not know is where coffee comes from or how coffee actually works to give you that energy in your head. So, to start off, I would just like to talk about the history of coffee. Alright, coffee actually was discovered in the 13th century in Ethiopia by a goat herder. He was one day, he was taking his goats to pasture to feed them when he came across a mysterious tree, as they called it. His goats ate from that tree, or they dropped coffee beans, and then after a few minutes, the goats started hopping around and being crazy. He thought they were possessed or something. He got scared, and he took his goats to the monastery. And then there at the monastery, he told them about the magic beans, and then they got curious about it. So they sent out people to collect these beans, and they brought the beans back, and they thought that it was some sort of miracle elixir. So they mixed it together with other water, some other leaves, to make a tea type thing, and that was actually the first cup of coffee ever created. I mean, and they loved it. It actually spread everywhere to Africa. Then by the mid-14th century, the Arabians had caught wind of this and how popular it became, and they wanted to profit off it. So they actually went to Africa and tried searching for these trees. So they got the seedlings from it, and they took it back to Saudi Arabia, and they were actually the first to begin producing and trading the coffee beans. So it became crazy as they entered the Middle East, and they actually created the first coffee houses. And then these coffee houses were so popular that they basically became second schools to the people. They called it, I don't know, it's some word in Arabian that I can't pronounce. It's Gamek Kava, something like that. It means schools for the wise. So it was where people would share stories and information about the world as they traveled. And then because so many people traveled to Mecca every year, the coffee, it couldn't be kept to them. So coffee actually started spreading out further from those people who traveled to Mecca and went back home to all around Europe. And then by the 17th century, coffee was everywhere in Europe, everywhere. Every country, every state, or it's not state, yeah, just every country. And then it was crazy. There was actually a huge fiasco that happened. The coffee stores, or coffee houses, they were selling coffees, and competitors like tea houses would actually be standing outside protesting coffee houses, saying that it was the bitter tasting devil juice. And then obviously at that time, people were horrified. Calling something made from the devil, they would get very scared and think that it's actually bad for them. This became such a huge problem that in 1615, it reached all the way to the Pope. So the Pope had heard of this devil juice, and he decided that he would sacrifice himself to prove this theory. And so he tasted coffee. When he tasted it, he fell in love with it. He actually gave it an official Pope's seal of approval. So after that, everyone just loved coffee everywhere. And also in England alone, by 1692, there were over 300 coffees in London and a few surrounding areas, but mainly in London. There were over 300 coffee houses that just every corner had a coffee house. And also they served tea, but mainly coffee. That was the biggest thing. And then by the end of the 17th century, the Dutch, or throughout this time, the Arabians were still the only ones producing coffee. They actually had like locked down plantations full of guards at every exit, so no one could take the coffee seeds to plant their own coffee. But then at the end of the century, the Dutch actually managed to sneak some people in to steal the seedlings of the coffee. So now they began growing their own coffee. And then in 1714, the Dutch did a pretty stupid thing if you think about like economically. The King Louis XIV actually came to Amsterdam, which is in the Netherlands, which is where the Dutch are from. It's confused because I know I was. That was really weird. But he came there, and then the mayor of Amsterdam actually gave the king a seedling to grow. Like, I don't know what reason he would, but that was pretty dumb. So the king took it home and planted it in his royal garden. It was the centerpiece. People came around just to see it. They tried touching it. He didn't allow them. There were guards everywhere. So it was just really hard to get to. But in 1723, a man by the name of a French naval officer by the name of Gabriel de Clew, he managed to sneak a seedling from the king's plants in the botanical garden. Because he was military, they allowed him access to see it, so he had an exploit way, I guess. And then he wanted to bring it to the New World, because they had a little colony in Marinque, a small island in the Eastern Caribbean, so like where Cuba is, that area. He actually took the plant there, and then he planted it there. And because of him, he's accredited with actually bringing coffee to the New World, which at the time was the United States, and Mexico and Brazil. He's the one that's credited for having over 1,500 different trees planted here. And with that, that is how coffee actually reached us, the US, and actually got everywhere in the world. So now that you know that, but how does coffee actually work? Like, how does it actually work in your head, in your body, everywhere? So what is the main component in coffee? Does anybody know? Caffeine, of course, yeah, caffeine, this little sexy molecule right here. But the way caffeine actually would work is it's actually a doppelganger. So it's like it's a copycat of another molecule that your body produces inside. And that molecule is called adenosine. So if you notice right here, this double ring structure, as it's called, is the same as there. So that is actually used, it's in your brain, as the molecules are floating around, it's actually used to trick your head, as I'll illustrate right now. Right here, the blue is adenosine, the orange caffeine, and these are adenosine receptors in your head. When normally how it works is adenosine would just go into the receptor and bind to it, and when it binds to it, it sends an electrical impulse into your body, causing you to become more tired. So because of that, your body, as more and more connect, you become more and more tired until you can build more energy. So like sleeping, that would give you more energy, so that would get the adenosine out of the receptors. But the way caffeine works, as I explained earlier, it's a copycat. It would move into these receptors. It connects to them because of that double ring structure, but it would not cause the impulse to trigger into your brain, so it won't cause you to feel more tired. So that allows you to go longer, like just dancing or whatever you like doing with that energy. But then after 6 hours, the caffeine fades away, and the rest of the adenosine will move into your brain at the same time, since all the receptors are opening up like quickly at the same time. Well, yeah. So as you can see, that's how coffee actually reached us and managed, or that's how coffee works in your brain. So very simple.
All right, Ricardo, what did you think?
I enjoyed it. Just the beginning part of it, just we didn't really notice what he was doing, but he was kind of explaining it and telling us what are the things we need to think, what is the first thing we think about. And most of us just said food, or some of us coffee, just to wake us up during here. So that to me sounded good. He explained the historic period and he didn't make the historic period kind of boring. He made it actually funny in how he described each and everything. Like at the beginning, how the Ethiopian found the seed, and I guess everybody called it the miracle seed or the miracle bean. And then how the Arabs, their name was the wise shop, and then and so on and so forth. Like all these little stories that people just liked it, and I enjoyed it. I liked it. The only thing was that he explained the historic period a lot, and towards the end he kind of ran out of time explaining how it works, which was good. Which I kind of wish he explained it a little bit more, but at the same time we got the historic period down there, and I say everything was good to me.
All right.
Yeah.
And he says everything was good to him. Oh. Thank you. We have to change that a little bit. I'm gonna have to yell at somebody. All right, Oscar. The attention device is okay. I think you probably don't need us to kind of close our eyes. If you had it set up right, you could do that reveal without that kind of imagining it. Just ask the rhetorical, what is it that you went in the morning, we would need, and that sort of thing. It was okay. It was okay. And when you show the picture, of course, then everybody gets it, what you're going to be talking about. So the subject is clearly identified. I thought your thesis was a little abstract. I know the topic is coffee, but what you're ultimately going to say isn't really very focused. And it turns out that you have a two-part division that's going on, and neither part is really connected to the other. I think you could have made a choice. I want to, review for you the history of coffee and explain why it became so popular, or I want to explain how it is that coffee works, and that's the thing that makes us, most desirous of coffee, that kind of thing. I think as it went, when you watch this back, you're going to see you were basically out of time 8 minutes by the time you finished your history review, and you're starting the other material when you're basically out of time at that point. You could have developed that point a lot more and made that the center of the speech. I was fine if you just stuck with the historical development. It's chronological, it's easy to follow, you've got particular stages. I think that might have worked a little bit better. The visuals, I like the visuals that you had for the part at the end better than what you had earlier, because it's a little bit more interesting. The timeline is okay, but you've got these great stories that you're telling, and you've got this dry visual to go along with it. I think I ought to get a cartoon of the goat herder in 1400, or we should see, a little picture of the protest signs in front of or the Pope giving it the thumbs up. Find a picture of the Pope with a little mitre hat and the thumbs up, or something like that, to kind of make it a little bit more interesting. Because as it is, you just have script and a line, and that's a little bit dull. Yeah. And then in the second part, when you start getting to, we've got things that are animated, we've got some color that's going in here, the receptors are being explained. That's the stuff that I think works the best and is most interesting, but it's the stuff that you spend the least amount of time on. So it's a little bit complicated. I think you could probably stick with the history review, keep the stories, because I'd agree with Ricardo. The stories are interesting, they're fun to hear about. Sourcing? I didn't hear any source citation being referred to. I know you got the information from someplace. It did not. All these historical events did not just show up in your head someplace. You read about them. If it's a book that you're making reference to, if it's an online article, if it's a video that you saw, we ought to be getting some site sourcing on that, and we're not getting any of that in the presentation. I think that's a little bit of a problem. The structure, the visual thing that the timeline helps you with is it kind of helps organize the content of the material, makes it easy to follow. But it's chronological, so it's not that hard in the first place. Just a little bit of an extra. All right, thank you. Oh, one other thing. The delivery was really good, except for the fact that you kind of stand in the back corner there behind the table, as far away from the audience as you can get. I think you want to step forward a little bit. I know you're trying to avoid standing right in front of the image there, but there's a lot of space that's not in the image there, and even if occasionally you step in front of the image, it's not a big deal. Okay, thank you.